The following is an encore presentation of stories from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. And in the studio we have got Chris and his wife Natasha from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. Both of them work there. But Chris, he's actually been a participant at Dooralong. How long ago was it, Chris, that you were there?
That was 2013 when I entered the program. We just moved out to Dooralong Transformation Centre from Miracle Haven.
So what led you? Why were you a participant at Dooralong way back in 2013?
Well, in that time in my life, I was at a crossroads. I knew I could no longer keep living the way that I was, and I'd been in active addiction for just over 10 years. I was very lost, very unsure of how to continue living. I really just didn't know what to do, but I knew that I needed help. I knew that I needed to stop using drugs and alcohol, and I really wanted some help, and that's why I reached out to Dooralong and asked if I could go and get some long-term support and rehabilitation, and I got much more than that.
Yeah. So this drug and alcohol addiction, it was ruining your life.
Totally, in every way.
Yeah.
Between the great family that I've been blessed with, and friends that tried to support me along the way, the drugs and alcohol were just destroying every relationship I had in my life. And as hard as it was, those people stood by me and tried to offer support and help, and it got to the point where they could no longer do any more. They were doing everything, and we knew that I needed actually professional help and long-term help as that, because it'd been a long-term problem that we hadn't been able to work out, despite all the attempts and help and love and encouragement they provided. I definitely needed something more.
A long-term fix. Yeah. So you arrive at Dooralong. Was it sort of, from the very word go, did you think, this is it, this is the place I've got to be, or was it hard for you?
When I arrived, I was so confused, I was so lost, I was so caught up in how I'd been living and what had happened, and I was just really in shock, to be honest, and I had no idea what the future would hold. And at that time I didn't really have any hope. I didn't know that it was going to get better. I thought that I would have to just feel that way and live that way forever. I didn't know how to deal with those emotions that I was having. There was a lot of thoughts and things that were not helpful to me, so that I couldn't see a way forward at that time.
Were you a Christian at that time?
I had a knowledge of God. I had, I guess, a slight understanding, but I didn't have a real relationship. I didn't have something that I would call personal. I didn't feel or experience a faith as such at that time. I knew of it, but I didn't know how to engage in that or how that would be helpful in my life at all.
More of a head knowledge thing rather than a heart.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So you arrive at Dooralong. It's a Christian sort of transformation centre. They have chapel night every Wednesday. What did you make of your first chapel night? I ask that because we get some of the guys here, we chat to them on Wednesdays, and they are honest enough to admit that the first time they went to chapel, they really wondered what on earth was going on, and whether you had a similar experience.
It's a great question. To be honest, I had no idea that the Salvation Army was a Christian organisation. Although it had been discussed, upon my initial assessment interview, and it was explained to me, I didn't fully comprehend that. So when I arrived and was a part of a church service, for me personally, I was very closed. I had my arms folded. I was really thinking. I was in here, and all I could see was people that were happy and joyous, and I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here? There's something happening, and I really want to be a part of it. But I'd shut myself off from that part of my life so much. I'd excluded myself so much from that stuff that I didn't know what to do. I was just completely frozen, really, and all I could do was just look around and hope, maybe I might get get a bit of this, but it did take me a few times to really break free of that stuff that was holding on to me at the time.
Because it wasn't so much that God had put those barriers there, but you had drawn down the shutters upon yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I had come to the conclusion that I'd lived in a bad way. I'd done the wrong thing. I deserved punishment. I didn't deserve love. I didn't deserve any of those things, and I'd really shut myself off from a possibility of having a relationship with God. I thought it was all about, I have to do all good things for God to love me. And as I started to be able to hear and listen at chapel and hear about God's love for me, His forgiveness that was available, that's what really started to break through some of those barriers that I had put up. And by the third or fourth time I was at chapel, I was just ready to let go of all those barriers and to say, I don't want to live that way anymore. I don't want to keep experiencing life like this. I want to open myself up to a relationship with God. If that's what's on offer, forgiveness, love, acceptance, I want to be a part of that, and I want to step forward in faith away from all the stuff that I was going through. And at the time I didn't fully understand that, but I knew I had to take a step forward, and that's what I did.
Yeah. And how long were you at Dooralong as a participant?
I stayed at Dooralong for around 11 months.
It's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit longer than the normal. I was really, I guess, involved in what was happening there and wanted to concrete the recovery that I was living and experiencing. And I was very blessed within the Salvation Army that I was given an opportunity to continue that journey in going to my understanding of God and of how to live in a healthy way. I was able to be accepted into what's called the Salvo's Discipleship School, and that was an opportunity to continue in that faith journey a bit more specific. So I was able to engage in Christian ministry and have opportunities for mission and service, and a lot of I guess time there to just sit and learn more about God and what His plan and purpose was for my life.
So at this stage of your stay at Dooralong, towards the end of that 11 months, God had really become the focus of your sort of your stay there.
Yeah, definitely. Alongside all the really practical elements of the program that was so helpful for me in terms of anger management, boundaries, the
life skills.
Yeah, all the life skills that come along, the introduction to Christianity courses and the discipleship side of things was what for me drew me into just a happy and abundant life. So I kept pushing forward towards that, and God just kept opening the doors for me to allow for more opportunities to experience that.
How did you feel? Because I mean, this sounds, even now, some distance away from that, sounds like a pretty amazing sort of awe-inspiring journey that God was leading you on. Had you any awareness at that time of just how amazing this journey was for you?
To be honest, I had no idea. It was really one day at a time and one choice decision at a time, and I had just the support and the love from my family who encouraged me on that journey and really stood by me along the really hard times. And then when it came into starting to be healthy and good times, they were still very much a part of that journey and encouraged me to continue in a good direction that they had believed was always there, but I had never really found before.
We talked to the guys and the girls during the stay at Dooralong, and we asked them what their hopes and dreams are for the future. A number of them say they'd like to give something back. They have been inspired by looking at some of the workers like yourself at Dooralong and want to sort of follow that pathway. When it came to the end of your 11 months, did you know what was going to happen next to you? So career-wise, vocation-wise?
Well, for me, there were two aspects that I wanted to focus on. One was growing in my relationship with God, finding more about who He is and how I can serve in the ministry and share that good news with other people. And the platform I had for that at the time was youth work. So for me, I headed in that direction where I had an opportunity to both learn new skills and learn youth work, but also be engaged in Christian ministry. And that was at that time what the Salvo's discipleship school was able to offer me. So that door was open and I went straight through.
Discipleship school, that's a new phrase to me, and probably to our listeners. What is discipleship school?
Yeah, so the mission out there is sold out followers of Jesus living, life in abundance, and that's not word for word, but I guess my experience of my time there, it really gave me an opportunity to do that. So over a 9-month period, it is also a residential program, but it's now open to day students as well. People can go in and have a lot of specific time engaging with ministry. So there's a lot of practical opportunities there. There's a lot of classroom learning. There's a lot of time that's set aside for quiet time with God. And also, I guess, a big part of it is the people involved in that ministry and the leadership really come alongside you and live and do that journey with you. And so that for me was a big part of it as well, having direct pastoral care and good leadership, guidance and support. It was all contributing to, I guess, me understanding more of how God works, and especially how He works through His people. When you're seeing people living that out, it was very encouraging for me, and I wanted to continue to be a part of that and also become more like Jesus.
So straight from Dooralong to disciple. Where is discipleship school?
It's located on the Central Coast, so it's out at Berkeley Vale.
All right.
Yeah, so
you went from sort of Dooralong to Berkeley Vale.
Yeah, and it was, I guess, a real faith journey of the people involved there, because I was given that opportunity, and it wasn't, I guess, the normal pathway that they'd had, but when God opens a door, and His people were very willing to not get in the way of that work, and I was very supported by the leadership there to come on, and they worked with me every step of the way and treated me just as anyone else. There was no feeling that I had come from anywhere other than I was a person who was seeking God, and they wanted to give me that opportunity to find out more about Him.
And the idea is to get up your skills and develop your ministry skills so that you can minister young guys who are going through drug and alcohol addiction battles. Yeah,
so for the most part, a lot of that equipping for ministry and for leadership is there. In my case, I actually never thought that I would be involved in recovery services and drug and alcohol ministry.
Yep, no, that's okay. Yeah. Look, we're going to break for some more music, then we're going to come back and we're going to introduce our listeners to Natasha. Natasha is somebody that Chris met at discipleship school, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Natasha is now his wife, and they both serving God at Dooralong in different roles, but we'll talk about your meeting with Natasha, and we'll talk about what it is that you do, that the two of you do at Dooralong. But let's break for some more music first. Who we got coming up next? We've got Corey Asprey with Reckless Love. Let's listen to Corey.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me, and you have been so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me, and you have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Snow wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99, and I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Making a difference to your family. Rima 94.9.
Well, the time is 27 minutes past 10. Here on this Wednesday morning, we're talking to Chris from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. He's telling us of his amazing journey with God, from drug and alcohol addiction to Dooralong, from Dooralong to the Salvation Army's discipleship school, because he's now been called into ministry. He's at the discipleship school. Chris was telling us it's at Berkeley Vale. And whilst he was at Berkeley Vale, something pretty cool happened for you, didn't it? Apart from all the great lessons you were learning, something really cool on a personal level happened.
Yeah, well, for us at the school, we are quite focused on being equipped and becoming leaders within the Christian ministry. And for me, I got to journey alongside 4 other amazing people who were students, and we had a very close leadership team, an intern from the previous year, and a couple of staff members who were basically in close quarters with us at all times, living alongside us, teaching, supporting, encouraging us, and got to make some really amazing friendships with all of the people there. It was very accepted and very much, brought into the family there of the people. And one of those people that I met is Natasha, who we have here with us today. And along our journey, I was able to, for me, be really inspired by young people who were seeking after God that hadn't come from the same background as me, had actually been, very strong in, all the peer pressures of life and different things to not go down that path. And I was incredibly inspired for people who were going after God's plan for their life, and I got to know them on a very personal level. We were all living
very close-knit
on site. Obviously, men and women were separate, but just doing 18 hours a day together in the classroom, in the mission field, at church, everywhere. We did everything together. So it was a great opportunity to get to know who people really are. You can't hide yourself from people when you spend that much time together. And it was for me, incredible to see Natasha in her seeking after God. It was incredibly inspiring to me, and I tried to do the same. So we were both kind of following what God had in store for us, but along the way He brought us together in that journey. Yeah.
And Natasha is now your wife.
Yeah, by God's grace, I've been so blessed that by the end of our time at the school, Natasha had her path laid out in ministry that she was going for, and I was going a completely different direction. But we knew that although we were going to serve in different places, that we wanted to continue building, continue building on the friendship that we had, and to continue serving God. Yeah.
We mentioned Natasha a number of times. It's about time we heard from Natasha. Yeah. So, Natasha, good morning to you. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm really well. How are you?
I'm very well. Chris was telling us there that he met you at Disciple School in Berkeley Vale. Now, that isn't local for you because your home, it's not Berkeley Vale, it's not even Australia. Where do you come from, Natasha?
I come from Russia. And it's not always cold there.
Despite what people think, it's not always cold there.
Despite, yeah.
So, what's somebody who lives in Russia? What are you doing at Berkeley Vale?
Maybe about 4 years before that, I started doing some missionary trips within Russia, translating for some Australian guys that wanted to share some Jesus with Russian kids. Within those 4 summers that I visited, there were a couple of people that mentioned the name of the discipleship school to me, and they had an incredible experience of finishing that school, and they just shared their life stories with me, and it was quite inspiring. But I never thought that I would be on the same pathway later on as well. I was a graduate of the Russian university. I was studying linguistics translation at the time. And in my last year of uni, I thought, well, it would be good to know what I'm doing next. And being with the Salvation Army back home in Russia since I was 6, I was just wondering where God wanted me to be at that time after the uni. And my mom, out of a sudden, mentioned the name of the discipleship school to me because we had spoken with her about it before that, long time ago. It was interesting because we started to think about the same thing at the same time, and knowing my mom, it was a very big step forward for her to even think about letting me go to go somewhere that far away. Yeah.
So you come across, you take that sort of step out in faith, you come across to Australia, you end up at Berkeley Vale. What's your first impression of Australia?
That was actually my second visit in Australia.
You've been here before.
Yeah, a wonderful lady in Queensland by name Gwen Fasians. She was a blessing to me. She still is. And she actually paid for my first trip to Australia. She welcomed me to this beautiful country, and I fell in love with it all the way back in 2011. And in 2014, I come back, and it's New South Wales, not Queensland. A little bit colder down here in winters. But I just love the nature. I love the birds here. Sometimes they can be annoying though. And I love people here.
So you arrive at the discipleship school, the Salvation Army discipleship school in Berkeley Vale. You meet Chris. Bit of a personal question now. Is it? I don't think it was from what Chris was saying, but was it love at first sight, or did it develop as you were sort of on that journey?
Yeah, it was more like a developed type of friendship. I was scared of him the first 2 months after he shared his story with us. To me, coming out of the family where our boundaries were very protected, I just thought that it would be safe for me if I just stay away from him for now and just keep an eye out and watch him grow.
I can understand that. Chris, would have been honest to tell people about his drug and alcohol addiction, and people would be a little bit sort of wary about that, sort of a little bit sort of, not quite sure. Yeah. So how long is discipleship school? All up, is it?
It goes for 9 months.
9 months.
With a 10-week break in between for practicum.
And the idea was that after the end of discipleship school that you, Natasha, would head back to Russia, is that right? Or wherever God led you?
God led me to America. I went to America for 2 years to be a youth pastor, also with the Salvation Army. I had some friends serving there at that time, and they invited me to be a youth pastor there, Salisbury, Maryland.
Yeah. So you went, you came from Russia to Australia, and then you were off to America.
Yes.
Well travelled. Did you go with it, Chris?
Not at first. My path was set to continue studying in youth work.
Yes.
And there was an opportunity at that time to study with an organisation called Praxis, who were working alongside with Salvation Army, where you would do your internship at a Salvation Army church, and I was blessed to go out to Western Sydney and serve and continue in that journey. And being that I grew up out there, I was able to go back to my family and live with them again after a couple of years, and I guess be able to see what life is like without drugs and alcohol. And I guess for me, in terms of what God had done in my life in those couple of years at Dooralong and at the school, to really go back out and as much as I wanted to continue in that path with Natasha, I had to learn how to trust God more and more. So for me, I guess in terms of building a relationship, we had to really focus in and trust God in what He was doing in that time, because we're going in completely different directions, but we knew that that's what was needing to happen there. So I was able to serve out in Western Sydney, and Natasha was in America, and I was blessed a lot within my family who helped me with work and different things, so I would be able to save money and be able to go and visit Natasha in my breaks, so get to start to experience what life was like over in America. And towards the end of her first year, we were blessed and married, and in the second year I went and joined her in the ministry over there as a volunteer.
Yeah. And then somehow or other you both end up back in New South Wales, and both working at Dooralong Transformation Centre. We're going to break for some more music in a moment. Before we do that, I'm just going to sort of the roles that you both sort of have at Dooralong. What is it that you specifically do at Dooralong, Chris?
Yeah, I serve as the ministry and family worker, so for me that's offering and providing practical and spiritual support to our participants, our staff, family members of the community wherever I can.
Yeah. And Natasha?
I'm a support worker. I describe it as a job that includes a lot of work, starting from changing a battery in your pager, finishing with just coming alongside when it's the time of need. For the participants.
Yeah, the real front line.
We're talking to Chris and Natasha from Dooralong. We were listening to their amazing sort of journey that they have been on in this last sort of 12 months, 2 years. We've got to that point in their story where they've both been to discipleship school at Berkeley Vale. Then their paths separated for a little while. Natasha went to America. Chris went back to West Sydney, but their paths have come together again. They are now married, and they are both now working at Dooralong. Natasha is a support worker. She told us just before the break. Chris is the family and
ministry and family worker.
And family worker, responsible for the sort of spiritual development of the participants at Dooralong. Okay, so what did it feel like, Chris? It's like going back to the school that you were a pupil in as a teacher. It must have felt very odd for you going back there.
It's an interesting journey for me to be back in a place that I basically learnt to live again.
It changed your life.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of the transformation journey, where I can then spend each day sharing with people what God did in my life, and hoping and praying for them to find that same joy and freedom in Jesus there. It's totally amazing, and sometimes I just have to stop and thank God for the opportunity to serve there, and hope that I can, I guess, as you said, that responsibility. It is quite a big responsibility for me that I take quite personally, and I want to do the best I can in that. And at the same time, I have to understand that, okay, God, it's your will to be done, not mine. So a lot of the time I have to learn how to hand that over, and I have to seek the guidance and support of my leadership, and ask for direction, and to be in a workplace that is quite supportive and very much forthcoming in providing me that mentorship and leadership that I need. For me, it's such a blessing, both personally and within the ministry.
It sounds as if it would be a tough place to work, but equally there must be some great joys. What are some of the great joys of your job, Chris?
Yeah, there's so many. Just to think of some really good examples of recent, when we come away from doing an introduction to Christianity course like Alpha or Christianity Explained or something like that, or even just for, I guess, people starting to experience relationship with God through Jesus as a part of the chapel services or about part of the church services they go to. When somebody comes to you and they've found that, and they're starting to live out their faith, and you know where the journey started, and you've been alongside that journey, when you start to see people really putting it out there that they've found their faith, they're putting their trust and their hope in Jesus, and really seeing the fruits of that being lived out, that for me is the great joys of the role that I do there.
It's a real privilege, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you able to keep in touch with any of the participants once they leave and see those fruits being displayed in their later lives?
Yeah, we hope and pray to continue those connections that have been established. And for me, I talk to the guys about it isn't that we do this during the week and then we go on the weekend and we do our own life. What we do here in program becomes a part of who we are. So for me, I always hope that our participants will connect in with their local church, will stay connected to Dooralong in some capacity, maybe coming out to chapel services and being involved in that way. And some people take a bit of time out there in community and then want to come back and be involved in voluntary roles and, you know, continuing in their own journey to find where God's going to be leading them in their life.
Do you get any sort of participants who are really anti-Christian to begin with and just don't want a bar of it, and then perhaps as the course unfolds 9 months further down the track, you can see them becoming curious about the faith? They've almost sort of become open to it in some way?
My hope and prayer is always that God would soften hearts, and the great blessing is we know that He works miracles in people's lives and He does transform lives. So I do see that quite a bit, and it's really interesting to go on that journey with people, because I'm not going to try and convince anybody of what God does. That's the Holy Spirit at work. That's the transformative power of the gospel to change people's lives. So just to be able to do life with them and meet them where they're at and be respectful of each person and their faith journey, I think that's a big part of people seeing the realness and authenticity in people who are sharing Jesus with them, because it's all invitational. I have to come from a place where, you know, I was invited to step into faith, and I want to do the same for people. And at times, as much as I would like that to be the case, I have to be respectful of where people are at in their journey and continue to come alongside them wherever I can.
Final question for you, Chris. A lot of people, and I'm sure participants as well, would have hostility, as I just mentioned, towards the Christian faith. Do they ever share with you what the main reason is for that hostility? Have you been able to discover what it is that for a lot of people is a really big hurdle to get over when it comes to acceptance of Christ?
I guess for me, I related a lot to my own personal journey with God, and I know the things in my life that have been challenges to faith and things like that. So when we do get into those conversations, for me it is a great blessing to draw on that personal experience that, you know what, I also had a similar barrier, and this is what was helpful for me. And for people, I guess it's really just listening and emphasising where they're at, and not trying to change that, because I'm not going to. I guess handed over my will in that situation. Say, okay, God, what can I say? What do I do? What do I not say? Yeah. And that's, I guess, really important part of it for me is, I guess, allowing people to be honest and open about it and saying, okay, that's a part of your journey. I'll encourage you to continue to pray about that, continue to look, you know, at I guess the evidence and encourage them in that journey. But if they have that, to also allow them to stay with that for a while and continue, I guess, inviting them to the table.
Yeah. Because so many people, I think, have that negative experience because of things they've heard, or, you know, perhaps hurts they've suffered at church. And I think sometimes they confuse the church with God.
Yeah, and I think the actions in the long term speak much louder than any of the words. They're going to be having a look at how I live, what's happened in my life, and as much as I can tell them, if they can see it and they can experience within the, I guess, rapport and relationship with that we build together in that ministry context, then they can say, okay, God really has worked in this person's life. I can see the difference, but also know that they do get an idea of where I've coming from, because they were once there themselves. So it's a great blessing for me to have God break those barriers down.
Isn't it St. Francis? Probably isn't. I probably got this wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, when he said, preach the gospel always and if necessary use words.
Amen.
Yeah. Let's go over to Natasha. You're a support worker. You say that includes everything from changing their battery in their pager or just sort of being alongside them during the tough times. Some of those tough times, I imagine, are really hard, aren't they? These people have been in addiction for 10, 12 years or more. They must be completely hopeless. They've come off drugs. They're in a bad state physically and mentally. They must, at the beginning, especially at the beginning, they must wonder whether it's all worth it at times.
Definitely. On the day of their admission, they have to memorize a lot of things about the place, but I think they're also going through the motions in their head and in their heart about their first step forward to the new beginning in their life. And unfortunately, we notice and we see that sometimes this step is not it's not going to be the last step forward, like they will have to make the decision sometimes again and again and again until they get it right. And coming alongside with our guys, with our people, and just seeing them flourish, I call it flourishing. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, inspiring.
Inspiring indeed, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned there that sometimes they're going to have to sort of face these challenges again and again. We talked to a lot of people who have been to Dooralong twice, sometimes 3 times. They tell me that they're always amazed that when they ring Dooralong back and say, look, I've fallen, can I come back? They're half expecting to be told, well, serve you right, you should have done what we told you. They're always amazed at the acceptance that you guys have, and you just accept them back. That's the case, isn't it? There's no judgment there.
I think we follow the word that goes like grace, being gracious and merciful, and God has been always gracious and merciful to us as well. And judging is not going to take us anywhere. So I think our staff members, and as God has given a lot of grace to us, we want to do the same.
Yeah. And probably it's wrong to look upon it as a failure. It's just another step in the journey that hopefully leads to freedom from addiction, but sometimes there have to be more than one stepping stone to get there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We talked to Chris about some of the great joys for him and his job at Dooralong. What are some of the great joys of being a support worker?
Oh, this is a really good question. I think just being around people, hearing them talk, and being a part of their journey, hearing their stories, and those stories become very inspiring, and you realize that this is life. This is the life they're living, and you get that blessing to be a part of it at some point, or you share their experience, and you can just feel how important it is just to have God in your heart and let Him in so He could transform you. Like we stand for the transformation at the Transformation Center, and I think it has the right to be, because that's where it all changes. That's where it all starts. Yeah.
Sounds like you get I won't say as much, but almost as much back from the participants as you are able to give them.
I try to.
Yeah. Look, it's been an absolute delight. It's been a little bit different for our listeners and for me, but it's been an absolute delight to chat to Chris and Natasha this morning. We just pray God's blessing on their ministry, pray God's blessing on their marriage, that they have both been faithful servants to you, trusting servants for you, and we just trust God has His hand upon their future direction, and take back all our good wishes for everybody back at Dooralong. So, Chris, Natasha, thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Phil. God bless you.
You've been listening to an encore presentation of the Dooralong stories, which can be heard live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and repeated 8 p.m. Sunday and 1 a.m. Wednesday, right here on 94.9 rema.cc.